It's the long-term success that I think people should be more concerned about, because really delayed gratification in our society right now with social media, there's really no such thing to a lot of people. And I think in some ways we need to bring back delayed gratification. It's maybe not the sexy thing for people to talk about, but I think it's a very important thing that's being left out of the mainstream media today. Is how can you build the business or build your life for tomorrow, but then execute on the things you need to today and be excellent in the small things? Because really that's what it is. It's being excellent in the mundane, ordinary, boring things that then lead to this awesome life. But in the moment, they're boring, but you can't maybe see the light at the end of the tunnel. But then 20 years from now, you can look back and say, wow, I'm really glad I made some of those decisions.
Welcome to the Simple Brand Podcast, the show dedicated to helping you create simple experiences for your customers and for your team members. Each week, we're bringing you amazing interviews with business leaders and authors who will teach you how to differentiate your business with the one thing your customers need the most: simplicity. Your customers live in a complex world. Let's make it simple. Now, here's your host, Matt Lyles.
Helping you create loyal customers and loyal employees, all through the power of simplicity. This is the Simple Brand Podcast, now heard around the world, including Brunois, Essonne, Ile-de-France. I'm your host, Matt Lyles, and today I get to talk with Alex Demczak. Alex is a former SEC quarterback for the Missouri Tigers. He's also a top keynote speaker and a trainer for the Jon Gordon Companies. And he's the co-author of the best-selling book that he wrote with Jon Gordon, The Sale, the number one strategy to build trust and create success. Alex and I discuss his lessons all around instilling integrity and building trust. Not only do we talk about how to build the right habits to instill integrity into your personal brand as a leader, we also discuss how you can help your employees build those habits too. So here it is. Here's my interview with Alex Demczak. Hi, Alex. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Matt. Thank you so much for having me today. It's an honor to be with you.
Yeah, well, I'm excited that you're here. I have enjoyed The Sale. Congratulations on that. Is that your second book?
Yep, it's my second book, and just came out with this book with Jon Gordon. We co-authored it, and so yeah, it's been really fun. And man, just seeing the bookshelf behind you, it's an honor coming from you with how many books. You're very well read. That is clear. If you're not well read, you just have a very good looking bookshelf behind you. Either way.
Yeah, I'm not going to admit how many of these books I haven't read. No, actually, I think I've read at least most of each of these books. And
Nice.
We were talking earlier, there's a few Jon Gordon books on the shelf right here behind me. So I was excited to see this.
I see that. I see some Jon Gordon, John Acuff. That Tools of the Titans by Tim Ferriss. That was probably a pretty long read, though.
That was a long one, but I remember getting a lot out of that. There's some really cool lessons. So yeah, I love reading and I love all the lessons that I get. But what's interesting to me, so I read a lot of business related books, a lot of nonfiction books, but then every once in a while, especially from, Jon Gordon, he'll release a book that's more of a fictional fable. And The Sale is written as a fictional fable. So why write it in that format versus the more traditional format?
Yeah, it's a great question. I just think our world is full of news, and I think our world sometimes just needs good stories. And I think we love story. And I think, as you mentioned, Jon Gordon, this is his 26th book. And this is my second book. So he has a pretty good track record. And so it was really fun to work on the book with him, with someone who's done it at such a high level for years. And so I've, been mentored by Jon for the last 6 years, been on his core leadership team. So I've just been a sponge, honestly, and tried to learn as much as I can about just everything, speaking, book writing, all this stuff. And so to answer your question, for me, I think us working on the story together, it's just kind of a no-brainer. And the book is probably 150 pages. It's not something that you have to spend months to read. It's hopefully something that, you're on a flight or maybe in a weekend you can finish it. And that's really encouraging, is that not only people are reaching out saying, hey, I got your book, which is a huge compliment, like thank you to people who have bought it, but then to say like, hey, I actually finished it and I really enjoyed the story, and it kind of allowed me to be introspective, or it helped, make an impact on me. And so that's what it, to me, and I think to Jon would say the same thing. It's like, you write a book that's timeless, and that's short enough to where you're going to keep the attention of people and you're going to move them to some type of action in their life. And I think I love that concept when it comes to books. Again, like a book like Tim Ferriss' Tools of the Titans, that's great. It's awesome. And there's a need for those books as well. I just think what I've been focused on, and Jon as well, is writing out these books that try to add a ton of value, but are more hard hitting. And it's something that, hey, you can easily read and digest.
Oh, yeah. And there's the whole storytelling aspect to it as well. I mean, you're a speaker, Jon's a speaker, I'm a speaker. And when we talk to other speakers about here's how you engage people, here's how you make your message resonate on stage, so much of it is you've got to tell stories. And when you have a fable like this, it really engages people. And like you said, you can read it on a flight, you can read it in one weekend, but you're engaged in the story. You want to see what happens next. Like usually these books really read to me, but this one really read to me because his name is Matt. But it's like, wow, man, how is Matt going to get out of this situation? How's he really going to turn it around? I got to turn to the next chapter and see.
Well, that's a huge compliment. Thanks for saying that. And what's cool is, I guess, with your name being Matt, is the book and write about Matt, who's the main character, in a way where everyone could relate to him in some ways. Not just if your name is Matt, but that's a perk. That's an extra added perk. But just for everyone, it's like, I'm sure we can get more into it, but just we try to write the main character of the story to where anyone who reads this book can be like, you know what, I see maybe a little bit of myself in that main character.
That's it. That is absolutely it. And as I was thinking about this, Matt, I was thinking, man, I've been there. I understand that. I understand where he is. I understand the difficult nature and some of those decisions that you have to make.
Yeah.
And it's all around integrity, all around making the right decisions all the time. So talk to me about your journey and what prompted you to want to focus on this story of integrity.
Yeah. So I think, to be totally transparent and honest, like it's not the easiest thing to write about or to speak about, because it's a vulnerable thing for people. It's a personal thing. Integrity is something, when you think about the word integrity, the root word is integer. It also is to be fully integrated. And so when we all think about the people in our lives who have made the greatest impact in our life, I would venture to say, if you think about, maybe it's your grandpa, maybe it's a coach that you had, I would venture to say that that person probably, if they had a positive impact on your life, lived with integrity. And so in some ways, it's kind of a harder topic to tackle, because it's, we could write a book being positive, which are great, and those are awesome books, but
right,
like you were kind of hitting at, like there's some things in the book that are kind of heavy, and it gets to, hey, am I having success at work but then neglecting my family? Are my priorities straight? And so I think it causes the reader and all of us to be introspective, and I think that's where it gets really good and it's needed. But to answer your question specifically, I just think in the work that Jon Gordon and I have been able to do with schools, companies, teams, all of these, especially the last 2 years, what we've been through, so many people are saying, how can I build trust? How can I, as a team, even if we're in a virtual environment, even if we're in person, how do we build this cohesive team that is trustworthy, that does, we can count on each other? And I think, just going back to my journey with football, it's like, there's no better example of a team sport, in my opinion, than football. And just the trust you have to have, all 11 people all have to be working in unison to make the play work. And if you can't count on one person on your team, then the play is going to fall apart. And so the same thing goes, there's so many correlations for that in business and in life. It's like, are you a trust builder or a trust breaker? And so on the integrity piece, that's kind of, I think, what the message of the book is about, is like, you can have all this success, but there's a way to do it the right way, to where at the end of your life, when you look back, it's like, man, I did that the right way. I was actually on a run one day, and kind of some of the storyline came to me. And so that's when I started talking with Jon about it. And so, a total God thing, in my opinion, of him just kind of laying the message on our heart in that way. And so, yeah, got to give him credit for sure. But I think it's just something that, as what's unique and what's awesome about working with an author like Jon, is that I would take certain parts of the story to him, and he would kind of just fine tune it, put his magic touch on it. And it was cool, because even you said, what's your journey with integrity? What's cool about this whole book, doing this with Jon, is that for the past 6 years, I've seen him, run his business and lead with integrity. And I think he's seen the same thing, hopefully, in me, and kind of working alongside him, working for him in some ways with his company. And so we talked about that recently on a podcast of like, it's kind of cool to see the full circle moment of, we've built this trust over 6 years. And then finally, at, this past year, when we started talking about this book, it's like, well, this makes sense to do this together because we have this mutual trust and respect and admiration in that way. And so I think what's cool is even the co-authoring it and the journey that we've had together speaks to the message of the book.
Oh, yeah. Well, and like you were saying, I mean, like this is a 6-year journey, not so much the writing of the book, but then kind of looking back and realizing, yeah, you couldn't have really written this book if both of you, both you and Jon had not been living and acting in integrity over the past 6+ years.
Well, I'll say this. You know that neither of us are perfect, but when you write a book about integrity, you put a big target on your chest. Like if I'm my wife will be like, "Hey, did you do the dishes today?" It's like you have to really make sure that you're on top of it once you write a book about this topic. But no, I'm kidding. But yeah, I just think it really just speaks to the co-authoring it together and the trust that honestly you have to have trust to do that with each other, and so that was cool in itself.
Yeah. Well, when we look at today, here, 2022, do you think that there's been a change in integrity over time?
100%. And I think about, if you look at the trends of millennials and Gen Z, so I'm a millennial.
Okay. I'm Gen X.
Nice. You think about the trends of like the Great Resignation, right, which is also, really it's the Great Reconsideration. And I've just to give you an example, for the last 4.5, actually 5 years, I was in corporate America. I had a 9-to-5 job that was a great job and it, was awesome. But about 5 years ago, I started doing speaking engagements on the side and kind of slowly started building this kind of side hustle. And it was finally this past December when, I have a 2-year-old daughter, my wife stays at home, and that's when I made the jump to being a full-time speaker and author. And we started a company called Write My Books that I am the CEO of. And so with those two things, it was kind of, in one way, it's like, oh, it's kind of scary to make this jump. But it's to what you were saying, the whole 6-year process. It wasn't just one day I woke up and said, hey, I'm going to quit this awesome job and then pursue this. It's, how can I build this foundation, kind of this kindling, so that when I get to that point, I am ready to make the jump and make this leap that I didn't just blindly make, right? I sought wise counsel. I asked people. I asked Jon Gordon. I asked my wife. I asked everyone that it ended up being 12 people that I went to and just spilled my guts and said, hey, this is what I want to do. I want to be a full-time speaker and author. Like, this is the work I want to pursue. Do you think this is wise of me to do that? And 12 out of the 12 people said, Alex, like hearing what you just said and everything you just laid out, like a lot of them literally used the term, it's a no-brainer. You need to go for it. And 12 out of 12 were like, hey, don't look back. And so I think what's cool about that is for anyone who's listening, whether you're in corporate America and wanting to make the leap, like, I think that's important to hear is like, it is that 5 to 6 year grind. I remember when I first started speaking with Jon Gordon and I said, Jon, how do I become an author and a speaker? Like, how do I do what you do? And he's like, Alex, you need to put your head down and grind for 10 years.
Yeah.
And then look up after a decade. And he was like, and then maybe you'll be an overnight success. Yeah. And honestly, Matt, I needed to hear that because it was easy for me to compare my life to his, whether it's on social media or his following or his speaking engagements, right? But you and I know comparison is the thief of joy. And so every time I look around and say, man, why am I not on this stage or why am I not doing that? Then I'm taking away from the blessings that I've been given, and it's wasting time that I could be making an impact on other people. And so again, Jon and I writing a book about integrity, we are not perfect in any way. And I think everyone knows that, but we've also seen people that do it really well and people that have their intentions in place, just like in the book, Randy, and so, who's a mentor and things like that. So it can be done well. And I think it's just so fulfilling when you live your life with those principles in place.
Oh, yeah. And you talk about comparison. And I think today it's our definition of success and looking at other people and seeing other people's success,
yep,
combining that with any sort of discontentment that we have. And that can throw us off our track. And I think that can lead to us wanting to make some of those decisions that are not of integrity.
Absolutely. And you mentioned earlier trends, like what trends or what changes in trust. And absolutely, I heard a stat recently that said 59% of people who quit their job in 2021, they quit because I think the word was hate, but it was probably disliked their boss.
Right.
And to me, that's crazy because leadership, the way that people are leading and as managers, like they have to understand that like the next generation, Gen Z, Gen Alpha, millennials, like it is different now. Like you have to be able to cater to them in some ways, as weird as that sounds, right? You know, if you think back to, our grandparents, they did one job for 40 years, then they retired and then they rode off into the sunset. We had a retirement party. It's different now. Like, I'm an example of a millennial who quit my job during, the last 2-year period with everything going on. And there's so many other people out there like that. So to your point, people who are leading a team or people who are part of a team, like you have to understand that times have changed, and don't be surprised if you're trying to do the old school humiliation type methods or just not building trust with your team. Don't be surprised when your top performer, your top employee says, peace, I'm taking another job. Because one more study I'll cite on this is they found that Gen Z, so this next generation that's coming up, they would rather make less money to be part of an organization that they truly believe in the mission and the values. That's really mind blowing if you think about that. Because if you think about, again, like our grandparents, they cared more about you. You work hard, you make money, you do well. But now people are saying, no, I want to go live in the mountains. I want to go live in California, Florida, and I'll find a job that I can make work. And so I think that really should be a kind of a warning flag to some of these employers saying, you know what, we have to kind of cater. How are we going to attract these potential employees, but then not only attract, but then retain? And I think that's where integrity is truly a competitive advantage. And even in retention, whether it's relationships in your life or it's employees, to retain people is to build trust and for them to opt in to not only to what you're doing, but what you're building and how can they be part of what you're doing.
Oh, yeah. Well, and we talk about maybe some Gen X, but then, millennials, Gen Z, other generations, they're so different than our grandparents. Well, keep in mind, our grandparents were assured some level of safety in their job. They had a pension. Pensions were the norm.
Yep.
They were assured some level of financial safety. Layoffs were not as prominent as they are today. Yep. I mean, like even today, like you can go and look on LinkedIn on the homepage on the right corner. It's showing you the latest company that has announced layoffs today. Companies are laying people off with a higher frequency than our grandparents' time. So we're no longer assured that level of safety, but we need safety in our roles. And so now we're looking for that psychological safety. Am I going to be psychologically safe in my role? Is my leader going to go to bat for me? Is my leader going to, look out for my best interest? And if not, then I'm going to go somewhere else where I can find that.
Yeah, you said that perfectly, because that is what's happening. And again, like I left my employer on great terms. They're an awesome company, but it was just, for me, it was more of, hey, I want to pursue the work that I feel called to. But even that, like so many of my friends, around my age, millennials, they are saying, hey, this whole process, this last few years has made me rethink so many things that, hey, you know what is a side hustle that I can start? What is something that I can go out and build to pursue the work I want to?
When we talk about integrity, what are some misconceptions that people have around integrity today?
Yeah, I think there's a misconception that, to talk about integrity, then I have to be perfect, right? Because I think what holds a lot of leaders back is maybe it's in their organization, maybe it's even with their family. Maybe they're not going to bring up certain things because in the back of their mind, they think, man, I've had these failures in the past. If people really knew me, then, oh man, people just wouldn't trust me. They wouldn't believe in me, things like that. And so I think a misconception is we have to be perfect to put some of these things in place or live by these certain standards. But I think that's wrong. It's like none of us are perfect, but I think it's the vulnerability piece, that when you're around an authentic leader who is vulnerable and is like, hey guys, I don't have all the answers, but hey, let's find them together. And I want to work with you and I want to be flexible to make it work. Like that's where the buy-in happens, right? Because people are saying, man, I love how this person is open and is admitting that they don't have all the right answers. And that's really admirable thing. And so I think when I think about even why we wrote the book, it's like, the entitlement trap for a leader. The once you start having this success, you can get to this point where it's like, hey, you know what, I've arrived. I deserve XYZ, or I can act in this way. No one will find out. No big deal because blank. And that's where I think we get into trouble. And I think no one's immune to that. I think anyone can fall into that trap. And so the question is, do you have accountability? Do you have people in your corner? Do you have a vision for where you're long-term you want to be? Or is it just, hey, how can I make this quick money? But as you see in the book, it's pretty cool to see the transformation that happens in Matt's life through really considering a lot of these long-term questions.
Oh, yeah. And vulnerability can be a strength, whether it's being vulnerable enough to say, hey, you know what, I don't currently have all the right answers, but I'm willing to help figure it out. People are more willing to sit down with you to help you figure it out. I think there's also power in vulnerability when admitting that you've made a mistake. I've been so impressed with some of the leaders that I've had where they would come in one day and say, oh my goodness, I made a big mistake. Like I dropped this ball and I've got to fix it. Them simply admitting that to me and me knowing that they're trying to fix it, like that prompted me to want to jump in and say, hey, you know what? How can I help you help fix this?
Yeah, 100%. And you can just sense it. You can feel it when you're around someone who, is leading with that authenticity. The best leaders that you and I know, they lead from the inside out, not the other way around. They know what they stand for. They know their core beliefs. They know where they're headed. And so when you're around that person, it's contagious. You want to be around them. You want to do business with them. You trust them. You love them, and you want to support them. And it's awesome to be. I mean, we could all sit around and name people in our lives who live that way. And so what's cool is when we have these examples of these people, we can say, okay, how can I not steal from that person, but how can I take certain parts of their character that I really admire and try to implement that in my own life? And that's a really cool thing.
Yeah. And that's not stealing. That's, I don't know what, emulating maybe?
Yeah. I mean, which is which is a huge form of respect to that person,
It is. It absolutely is. And hopefully it makes them feel more accountable for their own behavior because they're recognizing the shadow that they've cast on their people.
Exactly. It's a positive shadow, and hopefully you're not implementing their negative shadow. So yeah, that's a great word.
That's right. Did you know that in addition to my podcast and my articles, I speak to audiences all over to help them simplify their customer experience and simplify their employee experience? I've spent the last few years leading a crusade of simplicity across the globe. If you want a winning brand, you have to provide a simple experience to your customers and to your team members. Whether it's a live event or a virtual event, I'd love to partner with you and teach your audience how to do just that. With over a decade in marketing, I know how to hook and captivate an audience. And as a speaker, I know how to connect with that audience. Along with my lessons, I use stories and humor to keep everyone engaged and inspired. Then they leave with the knowledge and next steps to transform their business. As an event planner, you're managing lots of details to give your audience the most memorable event. The last thing you need is a speaker who will make your event memorable for all the wrong reasons. Not only will I leave your audience energized and inspired, I'll make it easy for your team to work with me. Hey, if I've built my brand around simplicity, then you know I'm going to make it simple for you. When you visit mattlyles.com/speaking, you'll find everything you need to know, including details on my topics, promotional materials, and most importantly, a link to connect with my team so we can book your event. So visit mattlyles.com/speaking. I can't wait to help your audience brand out from the crowd. We talked about this a moment ago. So sometimes, people and leaders can start with integrity in their life, but when they start to become more and more successful, I think, well, you called it entitlement. I think entitlement can seep in. I think complacency can seep in, and they start to veer away from integrity. So what are some strategies and practices that people can put into place to make sure that as they grow in their career, as they grow in their leadership, that they don't veer away from integrity?
Yeah, I love that. So a quote that I've always loved and respected is, your talent sets the floor, but your character sets the ceiling. And I think that's so true. It's like your talent alone might get you the job interview. It might get you the job. It might get you in the room that you're wanting to get in, right? It might get you up on that ladder. But I think we all know this, like your character will keep you there. Your character will allow you to stay there. And so I think where a lot of these teams or organizations get in trouble is they give high rewards to people who have high talent, right? And that's great. But then they'll be like, well, this person is so talented. So yeah, I know they kind of were disrespectful to the other employees, but hey, we can look past that because man, they are bringing in some sales, and they look past these little, maybe small issues, but then over time, those issues grow. And then there's huge issues. Then they're having to fire this person. They're having to pay the costs of turning that employee over, all these things that could have been avoided, maybe even in the hiring process. And so when I think about, you kind of alluded to this earlier, in the same way, if you looked on ESPN right now, or you looked on maybe even LinkedIn as well, I'm pretty confident that you could find an article about maybe a leader or a company that even recently just had like a big moral failure that affected a lot of people. I think we all could find an article. If we just Googled right now, you could find an example within like 2 minutes, right? When you think about some of these people who have made these really big mistakes, when you think about them, I do not believe that those people woke up one morning and said, you know what? Today is the day that I humiliate myself. I embarrass my organization. I lose my job. I ruin my relationships, et cetera. What I think happens, and I think we all know this, is over time, there's just these small rationalizations that maybe at first I get away with something. No one noticed it. Hey, no big deal. Right. And we keep going. And then over time, that starts to snowball. And these small years of decisions that then snowball into this huge thing that can turn into an explosion. And there's this song by Casting Crowns. It's called Slow Fade. The last line of this song, I'm not going to sing on your podcast. Don't worry. I don't want to make all your listeners turn it off here. But essentially, the last line says this: "People will never crumble in a day."
Right.
Such a great line after the song, because it's true. Like, people don't crumble in a day, but it's like, are you being intentional with your daily habits, your daily interactions that align with your long-term goals? And so to answer your question, I think for me, accountability is number one. Like, I have a friend who weekly we're checking in with each other on, hey, here's how I fell short. Hey, can you kind of help me in this area? Hey, that's a weekly thing. So I think the accountability is key. I think too, it goes back to finding people in your life who you're like, man, that is what it should look like. Like, that is an example of a great leader. That's a role model for me in business or in life. How can I, like we said earlier, kind of implement what they are doing, right? Because that is attractive. That is something that I want to aspire to be. And then number three, I think it's just having a long-term mindset and saying, you know what, I could maybe do well. I could have success in the short term, by making maybe a wrong decision. I could make more money right now if I just, if I make this emotional, quick decision, no one will find out, no big deal. But are you having a long-term mindset to understand that usually those little deals fall through and end up falling, that usually doesn't work out. It's the long-term success that I think people should be more concerned about, because really delayed gratification in our society right now with social media, and there's really no such thing to a lot of people. They just want what they can get right now, right here, right now. And I think in some ways we need to bring back delayed gratification. And I think it's maybe not the sexy thing for people to talk about, but I think it's a very important thing that's being left out of the mainstream media today. Is how can you build the business or build your life for tomorrow, but then execute on the things you need to today and be excellent in the small things? Because really that's what it is. It's being excellent in the mundane, ordinary, boring things that then lead to this awesome life. But in the moment, they're boring, but you can't maybe see the light at the end of the tunnel. But then 20 years from now, you can look back and say, wow, I'm really glad I made some of those decisions.
That's it. It's focusing on the long term, and whether it's our own individual actions, our actions to the people that we're leading, or even the actions with our customers, you're going to have so much more loyalty from others. And then, trust is what brings loyalty. You're going to have so much more trust and loyalty when you focus on the long-term relationship and not just that short-term transaction.
Absolutely. And yeah, I just even love, the Simple brand, how literally yesterday I was in Texas and I was speaking to a university and all these staff members. And I literally told them, I should have wore a Simple brand shirt when I was speaking there, but I told them, I said, look, every single person in this room, you are the brand for your university. Like, you are the brand. I said, not just, the president who brought me in to speak. I said, not just him. He said, he's great. He's awesome. We all love him. But I said, every single one of you in this room are the brand. When you go to Walmart and the way you treat someone and you're wearing your college gear and someone sees you treat that person a certain way, that is now there. You are the only representation maybe of the university that they've ever seen before. And that's their first experience, is you being short with the clerk at Walmart, right? And so that was just my encouragement. And I definitely saw heads were kind of nodding, and it's like, it's true. I think we all understand it, but we forget it. We get busy. Tony Dungy said this. He said, integrity is doing what's right versus what's convenient.
Oh.
I love that, because it's so true. We have opportunities every day to do the convenient thing, but it's harder to do the right thing. But we know it's better for us in the long run.
Right. I love that. Yeah. Sometimes the integrity choice is convenient, is easy, but a lot of times the integrity choice is really difficult. But the consequences down the road and the consequences of your reputation or everything else, that's what can be difficult when you make the wrong decision.
Yeah. And it's like, it could take you years in some ways. It's kind of a slow build. It could take you years to build your reputation, your all these things, but it can just take 1 second. I mean, one decision to kind of have all of this tumble down. And so I think just for leaders who out there who are maybe making more money than they've ever made, and they're having all this success, and they're like, man, business is better than ever. That's great. And that's awesome. And I'm so excited for you. But just make sure, are you thinking about, if you're introspective, are there any blind spots in your leadership? Are there areas where that you're neglecting? Maybe you're kind of in tunnel vision, building your business, whatever you're doing, but do you have any blind spots? I heard a leader who gave out a survey to his team, and he said, there's all these questions, and he gave out the survey and it said, the last question was, are there any blind spots in my leadership?
Yep.
And someone filled it out and said, and it was anonymous, they filled it out and said, you have so many blind spots in your leadership, you should legally not be able to drive a car. And, yeah, exactly. He reads this thing and he's like, what the heck? And he was kind of mad at first, but then he looked at it and said, you know what, if this is even half true, what can I take from it? How can I grow? And I think we all can kind of do self audits like that in our own lives. What are some blind spots that I have? And if we can't figure them out ourselves, I know when I go to my wife and say, hey, what are some things I need? It's a hard conversation, but in the end, it's better because I love her. She loves me. She cares for me. So she's not going to sugarcoat it. She doesn't care that, she does care that the book hit the Wall Street Journal bestsellers list, but to me, I'm her husband, and that's what she cares about more than that. And so my point is, just finding those people in your life for accountability to say, hey, what do you see as my strengths? What do you see me doing? But also, what are some areas that you think I need to work in? And those are hard conversations, but in the end, they're good.
They are good. And to your point about that leader that sent the survey out, and like your initial reaction is like, oh, I don't want to see this information. So someone that cares about you will provide you with the feedback that you need. What you want to be scared of is the person that doesn't care, because they're going to say, yeah, whatever, I'm not giving you anything. They may say, yeah, you did fine. Where in the back of their mind, they know, yeah, I don't trust this person. I'm leaving as soon as I can. I don't care enough about them to actually give them feedback.
Exactly. And you hit on it earlier when you said psychological safety. It's like a leader who is doing that to where people can't feel like they can't go to him or him or her and talk about these things, or they have to kind of gossip. It's like, man, I just feel like people will continue to lose employees if they try to lead that way. And so but when you're around a leader who's authentic, maybe it's an open door policy. It's hey, how can I serve you? How can I help? What are ways that I can make this experience better for you? How can I give you ownership in what we're doing? Even if you're an employee, how can I give you ownership in what we're doing here? What do you see? How do you see yourself fitting in here? Like, those are the types of questions as a leader. If you start asking those, on the flip side, man, don't be surprised when people are saying, hey, I have a buddy that also wants to work here. Can we get him a job here? Or, hey, what else can I be doing to help us grow? Don't be surprised on the flip side when that happens, when you start to be authentic and say, hey, here's the vision of why we're doing this. We have such a defined, exciting why that it's just awesome. Like, something that I haven't mentioned yet. I started a year and a half ago, a company called writemybooks.com.
That's
and
right.
what we do, I figure we get to it. But what we do is we help people write and publish their books. And so for us, it's like, it's this why that's so strong of we feel like everyone has a book in them, right? And so now it's our team in a 16-week process trying to help get that book out of them and then publish it into the world. And so again, it's writemybooks.com. And I'm sure we could talk more about that, but it's again, going back to the why of like, as we're building our team of people that are just super passionate about helping people steward their story well, it's like, man, how can we keep this why front and center? And as we grow and scale, how do we keep it just so relational that people love the process?
Oh, yeah, because it's all about, being able to showcase your story, being able to, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier about being vulnerable, being vulnerable, being authentic and showing your story. So we talked about, those leaders where it can take years to build up your reputation, but it can take a quick moment to lose it. So let's say you've got a leader that has done something big, devastating. They've lost the trust of their people. What are the steps they can do to build that trust back?
Yeah. So, I mean, it can't just be something that they're simply talking about. Like they can't just talk their way out of it and say, oh, I'll do better next time. It's like, you know what? Yeah. Whoopsies. It needs to be more than that. And I think, you think about a relationship, where there's a lack of trust. It's like, hey, you know what? We don't need to just talk about it. You need to show me how you care, how you're going to, be different and change things in the future. So I think that applies in the same way. It's like, okay, what are some kind of guardrails we can put in place here so that we can ensure you're going to have success? We're all going to have success together. But I think the guardrails conversation is important. Essentially, here's an example. So I do not have social media on my phone. I have LinkedIn. That's the only thing. So I don't really waste time on that. But the other apps where I can just always scroll and it's just a waste of time, like I don't have them on my phone because for me, it's a guardrail. I'm putting in place. I don't want to come home from work, come home to my 2-year-old daughter, my wife, and then just be on my phone. Like that is not what I want to do with my life. And so for me, it's like, what are these guardrails I can put into place to where I'm turning down the noise on news? It's good to be informed, but I don't need to just fill my life with news. How can I turn down the noise on social media, on all these time wasters that don't allow me to have my highest impact that I can? And so I think the guardrails conversation is really good and healthy conversation to have for anyone, myself included, of, hey, what are areas that I know myself enough to know that if I just have Facebook on my phone, I'll just be scrolling, and it's no big deal, So I think the guardrails conversation is huge in a business setting, but also in a personal setting as well.
Oh, definitely. And you talked about being able to have accountability, have people helping you understand where your blind spots are, helping hold you accountable. I think it helps in communicating those guardrails as well. Hey, 12 people that are close to me, here are the guardrails I'm setting up. If you see me getting away from these guardrails, can you help pull me back?
Yeah, and I have a great example. A buddy that I'm in a small group with, he in his past life, he was a major alcoholic, and he just really struggled with that. And so now, he's completely turned around his life. He's an amazing guy, awesome dad, awesome husband. But what I really respect about him is whenever we're out with friends or doing events, like he will never have a drink, not even just one sip, not because he doesn't enjoy the taste of a drink, but because he knows that he's just not going to he's not going to go there. He doesn't want to go back to that old life. So he's not even going to put himself in that position. And so I just have so much respect. And I've told him now, I'm like, dude, I just respect your decision because you know yourself enough to know that you're not even going to step foot in that bar. You're going to stay clear of that because you have this long-term vision of who you want to be as a dad, as a father, as a leader of your business. And so, yeah, I think such a good word.
So you're a leader, you're living in integrity, you're making all the decisions, the right decisions in integrity. What can you do to ensure that integrity is instilled throughout your culture and throughout your people?
Yeah, I think it's really easy to think about like putting things into place or, hey, here's the rules, here's the 10 things we need to all memorize, right? But then I think so many leaders, and we could, just like how at the beginning of this, I said, hey, think of someone who's made a positive impact on your life. They probably have had integrity. Well, on the flip side, think about someone who has had a very negative impact on your life, and they probably lacked integrity in a major way. And so in the same vein, that leader who is trying to, hey, how can we keep this organizationally as a culture? It's like, if they are not living it, yeah, good luck trying to implement it. Good luck to have other people to be along to try to do some of these things. Good luck, because they're talking about you. They're just like you read in The Sale, like Matt, the main character, he's saying, "Hey, I'll buy your dinner." He's flaking out on him. Yeah, exactly. They were used to his behavior in that way, and so he was blind to it. He was blind to it. And I think for a lot of leaders that are blind to their blind spots, it's like, man, that's trouble. And whether it's hiring a coach, finding someone just that you can say, "Hey, how can I do this in a way that's honoring to the people I work with, that I'm around, that I'm loving, serving, and caring for them as well, not just how much money I make? How can I do this in a way that's fulfilling for everyone around me?"
Yeah. And that goes back to what we were talking about earlier, casting the right shadow, or, just like energy is contagious, your integrity is contagious too.
I haven't heard anyone in all these podcasts yet say that, but that's so good. That's with all the book launch and stuff, doing a lot of these. You just said a really good line there, because obviously the word contagious the last few years we were probably, but that's so true. Yeah, good contagious, because that's so true when you're around people who are making the right. I mean, just like when I think about, okay, a buddy that I know, man, he's at the gym like every day at 5 a.m. It's like, that's a small decision he makes, but I respect that. He's knocking out one of the harder things to do in the day early on, starting his day. And it's like, that's awesome. And so it is contagious. It makes you want to say, man, how can I improve and how can I be better? When you see in other people.
That's it. Well, talk to me more about your book writing service.
Yeah. So writemybooks.com, essentially my co-founder, about a year and a half ago, I actually read his book. It was called Gouge. And I read his book and I read it in a weekend. We hadn't talked for a while. We just were, had kind of just reconnected. I saw he posted on LinkedIn, and I call him and I'm like, "Will, you are a super talented writer. You're like, man, thank you for writing this book. I needed to read that." And we just started catching up. And I said, "Have you ever thought about helping other people write their story?" And that's kind of how we started that conversation. I had my first book, Thrive You. He had his book, and then I was coming out with The Sale. And so as we started to talk about it, it was kind of like, oh man, this is so fun, because there's a stat out there that says 81% of people want to write a book someday, yet only 1% do every year. Yeah. And so to us, that's a huge gap. And so Will and I have kind of set out on this journey to say, how can we close that gap? Because we know there's a ton of people out there that have a story to share, and that want to share with other people. And when you talk about, making a difference, sharing your story with the world, are people that come out with their book, are they going to sell it to 7 billion people in all the world? Probably not. But changing the world, I think our perspective is changing the world could be you coming out with a book and maybe having one person, or maybe having your followers on social media, or your family, or someone reading that book and saying, wow, like that book really, just like all those books you have behind you, that made a huge impact on my life. That caused me to change in some way. And for us, we're going, man, that's what it's all about. And obviously, I could talk more about just the benefits of coming out with a book. We say a book is the hook, and so when it comes to speaking engagements and things like that, a lot of event planners, to bring you in, they want to know that you're an author and you have a book to talk about. And so, we just got, one of our authors, a pretty big speaking engagement the other day that he'll speak at next week. And so it's kind of this launching pad for authors that we've created. What's awesome is we're located in Columbia, Missouri, right by Mizzou, which is, the #1 journalism school in the country. So we've been able to bring on, nice. We've been able to bring on some interns who are doing some, some editing, some promotion, like strategic communications once we launch each book. And so it is so fun. And I'd encourage, any of your listeners, if you just want to learn more or talk about maybe a book idea you have or something that you want to share, it's writemybooks.com.
Writemybooks.com. Love that. I've seen that stat before. I think it's, like you said, 81% of the population wants to write a book. 1% actually does it. But I think there's another percentage point in there. I think it's 3% attempt their book.
But never.
Yeah. And never finish it. So out of those people, 2/3 of them that actually start a book, it never happens. All those lost books.
And there's so many, in the traditional book publishing space, there's so many hurdles. And if you don't have this many social media followers, you won't get a big book deal. And, and we do it through print on demand, through Amazon. And so it's nice for speakers because you don't have to have 3,000 books in your garage. You can just drive people to your website or to your link. And then when people buy the book, it gets printed and it gets shipped. And for speaking, it's awesome. And so for us, we're just saying, you know what? we think it's a shame that, if you want to come out with a book, you need the validation of some big book publisher to be like, oh, you know what, actually your story's not good enough. Sorry, we're not going to take it on. And we think that's a shame. And we think that people have a story to share and they don't need the validation of someone else to affirm that. And so we're just, helping encourage authors. I mean, for a lot of these authors, they've never done anything like this before. They're just like, hey, I have it all in my head. We're working with a former Major League Baseball player right now, and an unbelievable story. Spent some time in prison, has turned his life around. And it's like he sends our team voice memos or videos or, things like that. And then our team is then, ghostwriting, transcribing, helping him ghostwrite the book. And so it's just such a fun process for people who have had this dream for years. Like we had a conversation with a guy recently. He had some coaching, a college basketball coach. And he said, guys, I've been thinking about writing a book for literally 20 years. And we're like, dude, don't let it go 21 years, man. Let us help you. Let us help you out, man. So yeah, we're excited to help steward people's stories. And the cool thing too is that once we publish a book, we never take any royalties. So essentially all of our authors, we have it down to a 16-week proven process. And essentially in that 16-week time, whether we're ghostwriting or editing someone's book and then publishing, they're paying us upfront for the service at, usually 10% of the time. But then boom, once we hit publish, the author owns 100% copyright, all the royalties, we're not taking anything. Any speaking income they get is all theirs. And so we feel really good about that offering because it's like we're adding a ton of value to them with the book, but then it's like, hey, take this thing where you want to take it. If you want to do 1 million speaking engagements a year, awesome. And it's just really empowering for the authors knowing that they're not giving up a lot of their royalties.
Yeah. Well, and it helps provide a great service because there's a lot of people that have great stories that are going to provide value to other people. At the same time, they're not necessarily writers and they don't necessarily know the right way to write and edit and put their story to paper. So you've simplified that process for them.
Yeah. And in that 16 weeks, it's saying, okay, you have obviously developmental editing. So, okay, what you said in chapter 3, does that go well with what you said in chapter 7, the high level structuring of the book. But then like what you were saying is after that, then you have the line editing and all the copy editing. And so, yeah, what's really fun is on each book project, we have it's kind of a 3-pronged system, which each book, we have a project manager who helps us ensure the 16 weeks. We have a developmental editor and then a copy line editor. So it's awesome because there's a team around these authors for the first time. And so we're really excited about it. And hopefully, 10 years from now, when you and I are talking, you have a few of our books on your bookshelf back there. I'll make sure to send you some copies to get on your bookshelf. So
I would love that. Awesome. Well, Alex, this has been a huge joy. I've really appreciated this. I've learned a lot from you, but where can people go to learn more?
Yeah, Matt, thanks so much. So my website is alexspeaking.com. And so obviously, if you haven't had the chance to read The Sale, reach out to me. I'd love to connect, but you can also check out the book at thesalebook.com. And then again, for anyone who knows someone who wants to write a book, or maybe you're listening, you want to write a book, we'll for sure give a discount to any of your podcast listeners from the Simple brand, who we end up publishing their books. You'll have definitely a Matt discount for that. And you can find us at writemybooks.com.
Writemybooks.com. You get a special Matt Lyles Simple brand discount. Awesome. Well, Alex, thank you so much. I'm so grateful for your time today.
Thanks, Matt, for having me. I appreciate it.
I hope you enjoyed my discussion with Alex Demczak. So go and visit him at alexspeaking.com. You'll get access to all of his resources and lessons. And be sure and get a copy of The Sale. You can find it at any book retailer. But once you do get a copy, go and visit thesalebook.com. You'll get access to a free 20-plus page action plan that'll help you instill integrity habits within yourself and in your team. And if you're enjoying the Simple Brand podcast, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. It's going to make it so much simpler for you to get future episodes like the next one featuring Stan Phelps. Stan's the founder of Purple Goldfish Think Tank. He's a TEDx speaker, a Forbes contributor, an IBM futurist, and a certified speaking professional that focuses on the future of customer experience. And Stan's the best-selling author of the Goldfish series of books. That's 13 books that focus on all the various ways to help brands drive differentiation, increase loyalty, and promote positive word of mouth. And while Stan and I touch on some of the lessons across all of his books, we mainly discuss the lessons from his book, Purple Goldfish 2.0, 10 Ways to Attract Raving Customers. So go ahead and subscribe. You'll automatically get Stan's episode as soon as it's live. Until then, keep it simple.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Simple Brand Podcast. Want to make your listening experience simple and automatically receive each new episode? Visit our website, simplebrandpodcast.com, where you can subscribe to the show in iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you listen. If you're finding value from the Simple Brand Podcast, leave us a rating or review. That helps us get the show to the ears of the people who need it most. Be sure to catch Matt right here next week. Same Matt time, same Matt channel. Until then, keep it simple.